Stuart. I'd like to call on Stuart, our Assistant Commissioner, who's representing Shane tonight, and I've known Stuart for quite a few years now, haven't I, since I started in...
We're all getting old, David, you don't have to remind us.
Stuart was very helpful providing trucks from Sutherland, when he was the FCO there, out to our rural areas. I remember buying diesel Bedfords for $1,000 and $2,000, and
he couldn't get rid of them.
We appreciate the work that Stuart did in Sutherland, but at least he's one of the guys in the head office who's been out here and done it. So we've got a lot of time for you, Stuart, and how you can help us get things done. So welcome to Canobolas.
Thanks. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the invitation to talk to you. Shane is overseas at the moment, so I'm very glad to be here tonight. There's a lot of slides, but a lot of them I'll just skip through rather than draw on them. First two slides I'll show you were I pinched out of a presentation in the US on Australian hazards and bushfires. So that's how the US views. And you know, Australia's dangerous when the second lowest rating on the scale is high. So that's how our US cousins view us. As Brett indicated, we do a national outlook every year, and that's the November update, which indicated that we were going to have an above average potential fire season across the orange areas based on the Weather Bureau's predicted forecast weather. Then it rained. So whilst we had an early spurt of the fire season, we had a number of fires early, we had a lull in the middle, and then later on in the season we had another dry spell. So whilst we had a low volume of large fires, as been indicated, we had probably what you could say is a normal fire season. We had in total about 18,300 fires across the state. 10,000 of those were bush and grass fires, so that's about normal, but the size of most of those were quite small, relatively speaking. So we only burnt out 181,000 hectares across the state so far during the season. Normally we're up to 400 to a million hectares. So again, not very large fires. One of the reasons was we did get a not insignificant amount of rain, particularly up that part of the state north and on the eastern seaboard. Nevertheless, we did have some incidents. I've just picked a sample of them. I assumed Brett would be showing you local fires, so I didn't use any of this. That's Cliff Drive in the Blue Mountains, where we're laying a retardant line in National Park. Canobolas fire. Bogan Gate, which is an interesting bushfire because the pink smoke you can see is the fireworks factory storage area blowing up, which gave very pretty smoke, which sort of gave an indication that perhaps it wasn't really a vegetation fire. Unfortunately, it blew that way into the bush. Secondly, unfortunately, the bush next to it happens to be an old army firing range. So it makes suppression a little challenging. And just recently, as Brett indicated, that's the Pilliga fire. So we had a late spurt of fire activity up in the northwest. That was a Section 44 fire up in Pilliga, which took them some days to contain. As well as that, we had a large number of interstate deployments. We sent crews to Victoria, South Australia and Western Australia, which your crews participated in. The sky crane parked next to the fuel tanker, we loaned them a sky crane to go from here to Perth. That's in the middle of the Nullarbor Plain where it landed to refuel. It took 36 hours to fly there and had to stop a couple of times to fill up to get across to Western Australia. We deployed mostly all troops into Western Australia. We deployed appliances and troops into Victoria and South some of the local down in South Australia appreciated the work you all did down there and presented the cruise with a couple of thank you cakes, which is always good to get a pat on the back or some sweets. Just recently, for the first time, as a result of the cyclone activity up in the Northern Territory, which devastated Elcho Island, we deployed our base camp facility onto Elcho Island for the 2,000 residents who were displaced from their homes as a result of the cyclone. That base camp is still there. It's been dismantled once and repacked as another cyclone came through. They've re-established it, and there's currently something like 400 of the local residents who are in the base camp. And it'll probably be there for some months yet. I thought I might just briefly go through the RFS across New South Wales, which is what you are all part of. As you can see, we have a very large number of brigades across the state, some 2,300, where we cover about 95% of the landmass. We have, in 2053, we have 126 districts, 47 zones, 4 regions, 1 headquarters. We have 73,700 volunteers and about 850 staff. Something that's quite important is we've been running a cadet program, and you run the same program locally, for the next generation of people we are encouraging into the organisation. So far in 13-14 we've delivered 59. We've done 860 cadets. We've done 388 programs so far in the whole thing, and nearly 6,000 cadets have gone through the program. It's growing each year. More schools are joining the program, and it's been proving quite successful in cadets going and joining brigades. They don't necessarily join straight after the program because they finish their schooling and do that sort of thing, but many of them come back when they've finished uni or whatever to rejoin the brigade after they've qualified. So it's a very useful program. Rural Firefighting Fund currently stands at nearly 286 million, which is grateful support from the government in maintaining our funding base. We are investing, as David indicated, quite heavily at the moment in infrastructure such as stations. We are trying to get as many stations and control centres as we can built and the infrastructure upgraded, because there are many stations that are very, very old. We are building a record number of fire control centres to improve facilities such as this, so that we get them across the state. We are investing considerable amounts of funds into appliances and putting new types of appliances into the field. Now, these types of appliances are a result of feedback from you guys about what's going to suit you better. We're not necessarily as quick as we should be in responding to that, but we do get there eventually. We also invest quite heavily in aviation and specialist support. That aircraft is actually owned by the service, and the photograph is of it supporting SES at floods recently. We use aircraft for the RAFT program to do deployment, and we have other aircraft, fixed wing and rotary. And as I said, we have increasing numbers of base camp equipment where, for many of the remote fires, it is far more efficient to set a base camp up closer to the fire instead of having you travel for 3 hours to and from the fire ground, which is causing significant fatigue problems. So the base camps are increasingly being used for setting up at remote sites where you can't get accommodation close to it. We're also investing large amounts in technology. Not only are we investing in local technology, such as David showed you, and our operational technology, but we're improving the technology for the community to access information. The demand for our information from the community is growing exponentially. Giving them access through web portals saves a lot of phone calls and a lot of angst out in the community if we can get them accurate and timely information. We have new technology that's come in since the Victorian Royal Commission to use emergency alert systems. So it's the telephone system where we can contact people within a designated area on their fixed line phone or mobile phones. So we can send them a text message or a synthesised voice message. So that technology is now entering the system. It's improving all the time. All of the telco carriers are now joined to the network, so we can use any of the telco's mobile phone systems. And, up until last year, we could only use Telstra. So you could use a fixed line, but you couldn't use mobile through the system for Optus and Vodafone. Increasingly, our technology is having to be put on a mobile platform, either pads or telephones, because that's what people are demanding. They want to see that on an iPad or a mobile phone. So all of this information is now being made mobile ready. To give you some idea about the load that gets generated every time we have major fires, this was during the 2013 period. Our bushfire information line that we have at head office, over the 2 weeks of bad weather during then, had over 26,000 calls. On one day, the 8th of January, it received 7,500 calls. So that's the sort of volume you get when you get major fires going anywhere. We set off 99 campaigns. So each of those polygons you saw on the image, that's a campaign. So you register those in the system and it goes out and phones all of the people within that. Those 99 campaigns went to 43 separate locations. We sent out on the 8th of January 784,000 text messages and 224,000 fixed line messages. So the system has a very large capacity to deal with that sort of volume. Fires Near Me app, which is a mobile phone app, we had 150,000 downloads from our website. ICOM, which is our incident management online system, there was 1,000 concurrent users on the 8th of January logged on simultaneously. Our My RFS, again on the 8th of January, there was 21,000 views during the day and like 1,600 concurrent users at any one time. So the load on our system during major fires is extraordinary. So one of the investments we're doing in technology is making our systems more robust. South Australia's system during their recent fires failed in the middle of it. Their web system went down. And that caused significant problems for them because there was no public messaging available until they could restore it. So the community gets increasingly hooked on this stuff, and it makes it more critical that we have it operating and can meet the peak load. A couple of initiatives and a couple of future challenges. This isn't an exhaustive list, I just thought there was a couple of issues that might be worthwhile. We are currently doing a personal protective clothing review. We actually, New South Wales RFS leads a national review of PPC across the Commonwealth. So we are leading that review. So not only doing it locally, but it's also being done nationally. And we lead that. Now, we've got over 80 submissions so far, and I would encourage you to talk to your local staff because there will be more consultation and discussions about the future of the protective clothing and capitalising on some of the newer textiles and materials that are now becoming available, which will improve the protection and the wearability of our PPE. The second national systems going on is a review of the warning system. If any of you have looked at other states' websites during the fire season, the way that each state does its warnings, whilst it's using the same system, implements it somewhat differently. Not only does the fire industry do it differently, but each of the hazards, such as SES for floods and storm, are using the system differently. One of the feedbacks coming back from the community is it's getting really confusing when you're using different language to describe different things, but it's the same type of message. We want to tell you to do something and be prepared. If you're giving them that in a different format and a different style, the community start getting confused. So the National Warnings Review is looking at how to make it a more consistent messaging format, how to have the system used more consistently across the board, and how to make all hazards language as similar as we can so that the community doesn't get confused about what we're saying. There's no point in us sending messages out if the community don't understand it. They've got to get the message. And increasingly, how to use social media and the web-based tools that mapping allows to distribute some of the warning information. One of the critical problems is when you display some of this information on the web page, it can look really confusing because there's multiple warnings at multiple places about multiple things. So if you're not careful, the community just can't follow that. It's hard enough for us to follow it, they can't. So that national review, which we're heavily involved in, is trying to harmonise all those things. A couple of challenges that we'll be facing in the future. We have a number of coronial inquiries. Wombalong Parliamentary Inquiry has recently handed down its final report. The coronial inquiry into Wombalong is scheduled to finalise its sittings in June. So there will be no doubt a report after that. The government's response to Wombalong is due August, I believe. We've been advised that there will be a coronial for the Lynx View road fire in the Blue Mountains. That'll commence in June. And as well as Mount York fire in Blue Mountains. Again, that will be June. State mine fire from Lithgow. They haven't advised if there will be a formal coronial yet, but they're sourcing information from the coroner's office. So those coronials will be going over the next few months, which inevitably will bring out recommendations from the coroner that we will need carefully consider. One of the other challenges for us is social media. Social media can be a really useful tool to help us distribute information. It can also be a significant problem for us tracking it. Once it's out in the social media environment, it replicates itself significantly. So if the information out there is not accurate, that will get replicated and the inaccuracy will follow it. One of the issues is the volume of these things is truly remarkable. So that's the total numbers of hits to our website, Facebook impressions, Twitter impressions, and survival plan downloads that happened in the 2013 area. So the volume of these things that's going on is enormous. So one of the issues that we've discovered is that, like in 2008, we established some of those media channels like Facebook. Then came the 2009 Victorian bushfires. We then needed a social media policy, and in January 2013, we had those major fires in the Blue Mountains. So what's happened with the loading is that. So it's going up at an enormous rate. So people are accessing these electronic features increasingly and in greater numbers, so that load is just going to keep increasing. So what have we learned? If you don't plan for that to happen, it will swamp you. You naturally need a policy framework and some guidance for how to manage it. You have to understand the audience that is operating in that environment, and you need to monitor what's going on. We have a tool that was designed by the CSIRO which tracks Twitter feeds for certain phrases and terms, and it can pick them up and highlight that there's a Twitter feed going on about a bushfire somewhere or a fire somewhere. So it can help filter that. but you need to monitor what they're doing, because if you don't get to the misinformation quickly and try and correct it, it will spread very, very quickly. And that's a bigger problem to solve, because it has a very wide reach. There are certainly benefits of social media we can explore. Yes, we have a lot of people accessing our social media site, but I'm not sure how much of that translates to they actually do something about it. And I'll go through another issue that I believe we have in the future shortly. And the pace of change is enormous, so we need to keep up with that. Bushfire survival plans, which are part of that. How are we doing with them? Probably not as well as we would like. Some research was done after the Wombalong and Lynchview fires. 1 in 5 people had never thought about having one. 1 in 3 had no plan at all. Many people have a different perception of what plan means. We have a perception that it means you should write something down. Their idea of a plan is in here, not necessarily on there, which is great, but that's very hard to share with people if it's in your head. So it's not necessarily consistently done either. One of the problems is how do we get people to leave early and take the warnings we give seriously. The research indicated that something like 85% of people, even if we gave them a warning, would wait and see what happened. So they wouldn't necessarily immediately react to the warning we gave them, unless the warning said, you need to leave right now. So unless you were explicit about go right now, they would wait and see. Again, writing a plan is one thing, but if you don't share it with everybody in your house, then it's not very useful. And a large number of the respondents indicated that one member of the family, usually the mother, had written one, but that was it. Nobody else in the house shared it. And interestingly enough, social media didn't rate highly as the first choice for information. The greatest proportion of people talk to their neighbours or talk to their family. That was their source of immediate intelligence, not websites or other social media. That wasn't the first choice they had. So survival plans certainly have a place, but there's a lot of work to be done getting them to be used more effectively. That's a montage of major fires. It's taken off Sentinel data, so they're large fires, for about 20 years. It's 1997 to 2008. Australian continent's not a stranger to bushfires. So the Bushfire CRC commissioned some research to look at the community's appreciation of bushfires in Australia, and a third of the respondents said they had some appreciation of it. A third of them said they'd never ever thought of it, and a third of them was sort of aware of something. So 2/3 of the respondents basically had no clue that bushfires are an issue in New South Wales, in Australia. Despite we have, I don't know how many examples of bushfires that happen every year somewhere on the continent. Our perspective of what bushfires mean is they cause damage and we need to do something about it. The perspective of the normal householder, according to the research, is more like that. So bushfires is in all that static, maybe. So they've got all these things they're thinking about, and we've got to try and get them to think about bushfires, which only happen to them periodically. And most of the time, they'll just see it on 6 o'clock news. So our challenge is how to get them more engaged so that they understand their risk. And I'm sure many of you have seen these sorts of events happen around any fires you've been to. People who sit there while the fire merrily burns behind them. They keep playing cricket while the fire burns behind them. People who don't deal with the hazard that's around their own property. That is, ladies and gentlemen, from my point of view, one of the major challenges we have in the future. How do we get people to get out of their complacency, understand that they are at risk, and understand they have a role to play in fixing that risk? They cannot rely on us to fix it for them all of the time. We can't do that. They need to play a role in this. That is one of their biggest challenges in my view. So thank you. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to, I may not have an answer, but I'm happy to answer what I can and take back what I can't. I'll be here around, so if you have a question, by all means,